The wind howled through the jagged peaks of the Caucasus Mountains, carrying with it the bitter chill of ancient secrets. Director Reid Harper stood at the edge of the military transport helicopter's open door, his weather-worn face illuminated by the ethereal glow of the aurora borealis dancing overhead. Below, the abandoned Soviet-era base sprawled like a concrete skeleton, its deteriorating structures a testament to humanity's fleeting presence in these untamed heights. 2 minutes to touchdown, the pilot's voice crackled through his headset. Harper's grip tightened on the overhead handle as he turned to face his team. 6 of S.T.A.R's finest operators sat in full tactical gear, their faces obscured by advanced breathing apparatus designed not just for the thin mountain air, but for protection against supernatural entities. Remember, Harper's voice cut through the helicopter's drone. We're dealing with Class 4 necromantic signatures. These aren't your standard death cultists. Intel suggests they've tapped into something old, something that predates the Soviet occupation. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Stick to the protocols. One mistake and we'll be joining whatever army they're raising down there. The helicopter touched down on a crumbling helipad, its rotors stirring up decades of accumulated dust and debris. Harper was first out, his modified M4 carbine scanning the perimeter. The weapon's barrel gleamed with inlaid silver runes, standard issue for S.T.A.R operators after the Moscow incident proved conventional firearms useless against certain entities. As his team moved into formation, Harper's mind drifted momentarily to another cold night. 20 years ago, he saw Amanda's face, contorted in agony as something ancient and malevolent took hold of her. Her screams had filled their childhood home, and then silence. The investigation found nothing. No body, no evidence, just a room full of symbols burned into the walls and floor, and a lingering smell of sulfur that took weeks to fade. Director, Major Kingston's voice snapped Harper back to the present. We've got movement in the Eastern Complex. Through his tactical visor's enhanced imaging, Harper could see heat signatures moving with unnatural fluidity through the abandoned buildings. They weren't generating the normal thermal patterns of living beings. Instead, they appeared as cold spots against the ambient temperature. 3-man teams, Harper ordered. Kingston, take Reeves and Walsh, sweep the western approach. Bradley, you're with Jackson and Peterson on the eastern complex. I'll take point with Romano and Blackwood on the central building. Watch your corners, and remember, if it's already dead, aim for the joints. The team split off with practiced precision. Harper led his group toward the Central Administration Building, its brutalist architecture looming against the starlit sky. Dr. Isabella Romano moved silently beside him, her specialized equipment scanning for occult energy signatures. Dr. Victor Blackwood brought up the rear, carrying what looked like a heavily modified satellite phone. In reality, a quantum resonance detector capable of identifying dimensional anomalies. The building's entrance had been sealed with heavy steel doors decades ago, now covered in rust and strange symbols that seemed to shift in the darkness. Romano approached, her gloved hand hovering over the markings. Recent, she whispered, her Italian accent barely noticeable after years of working with the agency. These aren't just containment runes, they're invitation sigils. She turned to Harper, her expression grave behind her visor. They wanted someone to find this place. Can you break them? Harper asked. Though he already knew the answer, Romano was the best in her field, a prodigy who'd rewritten half of S.T.A.R's occult defense protocols. She nodded, reaching into her tactical vest to retrieve a small leather pouch. The contents clinked softly as she withdrew a handful of crystalline shards that gleamed with an inner light. Cover me, she said, kneeling before the door. Harper and Blackwood took up defensive positions as Romano began her work. The air grew heavy with static electricity as she placed the crystals in a precise pattern, mirroring the dark sigils on the door. She began to chant in a language that made Harper's teeth ache, a counter-ritual that would unravel the necromancer's work. The symbols on the door began to move, flowing like mercury across the rusted surface. A low groaning filled the air, not from the door's hinges, but from something deeper, as if the mountain itself was in pain. Energy spike. Blackwood called out, his device emitting a series of urgent beeps. Something's responding to the ritual. Harper's radio crackled to life. Director, we've got movement in the Western Complex. Kingston's voice was tight with tension. A lot of movement, temperatures dropping rapidly. Hold position, Harper ordered. Do not engage unless... The ground beneath their feet trembled. Romano's crystals shattered one by one, their light extinguished by an unseen force. The symbols on the door had stopped moving, now forming a pattern that made Harper's vision blur when he tried to focus on it. Get back, Romano shouted, but it was too late. The door exploded inward with a blast of Arctic air, throwing them all backward. Harper rolled with the impact, coming up with his weapon ready. The doorway was now a gaping maw of absolute darkness, and from its depths came a sound that Harper had heard only once before, in his sister's room, on that terrible night. A low, rhythmic chanting that seemed to bypass his ears and vibrate directly in his skull. As his team regrouped, Harper saw the first figures emerge from the darkness. They wore the tattered remains of Soviet military uniforms, their desiccated flesh stretched tight over yellowed bone. But these weren't mindless shamblers. Their movements were precise, coordinated, and their empty eye sockets glowed with an intelligent malevolence. Contact. Harper opened fire, his enhanced rounds tearing through the animated corpses with supernatural precision. Each hit caused the unholy energy, animating them to dissipate in bursts of sickly green light. Romano began a protection ritual as Blackwood deployed a portable barrier generator. The air in front of them shimmered with a combination of technological and mystical shields, S.T.A.R's trademark fusion of science and sorcery. But the dead kept coming, and behind them, Harper caught glimpses of robed figures moving in the darkness. The necromancers had spotted them, and this was just the welcoming party. All teams converge on the central building, Harper commanded through his radio. We've got multiple tangos and heavy necromantic activity. Prepare for... His words were cut short by a piercing scream that came from everywhere and nowhere at once. The sound brought him to his knees, and in that moment of weakness, he saw her. Amanda stood in the doorway, but not as she had been. Her form flickered like a bad transmission, sometimes the innocent teenager she'd been, sometimes something else, something that wore her face like an ill-fitting mask. She pointed at him with a hand that seemed to bend in impossible ways. "You're late, brother," she said, her voice a chorus of whispers. "They've already found it. The key, the door, the warden comes." Then the real horror began. The vision of Amanda vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving behind a vacuum of cold air that made Harper's lungs burn. The dead soldiers surged forward, their movements becoming more coordinated with each passing second. Behind them, a deep thrum began to pulse through the facility's foundations. "They're channeling something," Romano shouted over the cacophony, her hands weaving complex patterns in the air. The protective barrier flickered as waves of necromantic energy crashed against it. "This isn't just reanimation, they're trying to thin the veil between worlds." Kingston's team arrived from the west, laying down suppressing fire with consecrated rounds. The bullets traced lines of golden light through the darkness, each impact releasing bursts of purifying energy that reduced the undead to ash. But for every soldier they put down, two more shambled out of the darkness. "Blackwood, status on the energy signature," Harper commanded, reloading his weapon with practiced efficiency. The scientist's fingers flew over his equipment, his face illuminated by rapidly changing displays. "It's like nothing we've seen before, Director. The pattern suggests, by all that's holy," he looked up, face pale. "It's a beacon. They're not just raising the dead, they're calling something through." The ground beneath their feet began to vibrate at a frequency that made Harper's teeth chatter. The walls of the Soviet facility cracked, revealing older stonework beneath ancient blocks carved with symbols that predated recorded history. "Bradley's team, report." Harper called into his radio, but only static answered. The eastern complex had gone dark. A new sound cut through the chaos, a low, melodic chanting that seemed to come from the bowels of the earth itself. The undead soldiers suddenly stopped their advance, standing at attention like the military force they'd once been. In the darkness beyond them, robed figures finally emerged. The necromancers moved with an unnatural grace, their black robes seeming to absorb the light around them. Their leader stepped forward, pushing back his hood to reveal a face that was more geometry than flesh, angles and planes that hurt to look at directly. Director Harper, the figure spoke, its voice resonating on multiple frequencies simultaneously. "We've been expecting you. Your sister sends her regards." Harper's finger tightened on the trigger, but Romano grabbed his arm. "Don't," she warned. "He's trying to provoke you. That's not a person anymore. It's a vessel." "Indeed, Dr. Romano," the thing wearing human shape said. "Your reputation for insight serves you well. We are merely borrowing this form, as we borrowed little Amanda's all those years ago. She was a key, you see, a test. And now her brother, the decorated soldier, the man who built an agency to fight the darkness. You're right on schedule." The necromancer raised its arms, and the stone floor between them split open. From the crack rose an obelisk of pure darkness, its surface covered in writing that moved and shifted like living things. Harper felt a pull toward it, a recognition that went beyond sight or memory. Something in his blood knew this object. "The Black Warden's anchor," the necromancer announced with something like pride. "One of 7 keys to the door between worlds. Your sister helped us locate it, though she fought us quite fiercely at first. Family traits, it seems." "Where is she?" Harper demanded, his voice raw. "Waiting," the necromancer replied. "In the spaces between spaces, in the void where the Warden dwells. She's been there for 20 years, Director Harper, helping us prepare. Not willingly at first, but time moves differently in the void. 20 years for you, centuries for her. What's left of her, anyway." The obelisk pulsed, sending out waves of darkness that dimmed the tactical lights and made the air thick with potential. Harper saw his team's postures change as they prepared for what was coming. They'd trained for this, but training could only prepare you so much for the moment when reality itself began to unravel. "Kingston," Harper said quietly into his comm. "Protocol Omega, just like we planned." "Sir?" Kingston's voice was steady, professional, but Harper could hear the concern underneath. "You know what to do if I'm compromised, if I'm not me anymore." The necromancer laughed, the sound rippling through multiple dimensions. "Oh, Director, still thinking in such linear terms, still believing you can stop what's coming with bullets and barriers. You built your agency on the assumption that the supernatural could be contained, controlled, studied, but you never understood the truth. It's not just coming, it's already here, it always has been, and you were one of its architects all along." The obelisk's writing began to glow with an anti-light that hurt Harper's soul. As the glow intensified, he saw other figures emerging from the shadows. Bradley's team, but wrong, moving with jerky motions like puppets on strings. Behind them came more shapes, things that had never been human, their forms suggesting geometries that shouldn't exist in 3-dimensional space. And in the midst of it all, Harper heard a whisper, felt a tug in his mind that was achingly familiar. Amanda's voice, but not from 20 years ago. A voice aged by centuries in the void, telling him that everything he'd built, every mission he'd led, every step he'd taken to protect the world from supernatural threats, it had all been part of the plan. The Black Warden's plan. "Begin the awakening," the necromancer commanded, and the world began to break apart. The first fracture appeared in the air itself, a jagged line of absolute darkness that split the space between Harper and the obelisk. Through it, he caught glimpses of a realm beyond, vast cities built from geometries that defied physics, oceans of living shadows, and skies filled with things that looked like stars but pulsed with malevolent awareness. "Containment field," Romano shouted, her hands moving in complex patterns as she drew sigils in the air with trails of blue fire. Blackwood's technology hummed to life, creating a dome of energy that meshed with Romano's spellwork. The barrier crackled where it intersected with the dimensional tear, trying to hold back the impossible forces leaking through. The undead soldiers began to change. The necrotic energy animating them was replaced by something else, something older. Their flesh melted away, revealing not bone but crystalline structures that grew and shifted like living fractals. Each one became a prism refracting reality itself. "Director," Kingston's voice came through the comm, tight with controlled panic. The quantum readings are off the scale. This matches the theorized patterns for a Class 7 dimensional incursion. Harper's blood ran cold. S.T.A.R had only recorded 2 Class 7 events in its entire history. Both had resulted in the complete disappearance of major population centers. Fall back to secondary positions, Harper ordered. Initiate firebreak protocol. But before his team could move, the necromancer raised its hands. The crystalline soldiers moved as one, their prismatic forms catching the light from Romano's barrier and refracting it back as beams of pure entropy. Where the beam struck, matter began to dissolve. The void remembers you, Reid Harper. The necromancer's voice had changed, becoming a chorus of whispers. Your sister wasn't the first of your line to touch its depths. Your ancestors knew. They were there when the first seal was placed, when the Black Warden was bound. Images flooded Harper's mind. Ancient rituals performed in stone circles, his ancestors wielding powers they barely understood, making deals with entities that existed before time. He saw the price they paid, generation after generation, offering their firstborn to maintain the seals that kept the Black Warden contained. Amanda wasn't taken, Harper realized, the truth hitting him like a physical blow. She was claimed because I was supposed to be the offering. The necromancer's face split in a smile that went all the way around its head. The eldest child of each generation, but your parents tried to hide you, to break the cycle. They thought love could overcome cosmic law. The void does not recognize such sentiment. It took her instead, and now the balance must be restored. The obelisk's writings began to move faster, coalescing into a single symbol that burned itself into Harper's vision. He felt something inside him respond, a heritage he'd never known he carried awakening to its call. Sir, Blackwood shouted, your vital signs, you're resonating with the artifact. Harper could feel it. Each pulse from the obelisk matched his heartbeat. Each wave of void energy sang in harmony with his blood. The truth of his family's legacy, the real reason he'd been drawn to create S.T.A.R. All of it had been leading to this moment. Romano began a desperate incantation, ancient words of binding that made the air thick with power. The containment field strengthened, pushing back against the dimensional tear, but the necromancer only laughed. Your understanding of the old ways is impressive, Dr. Romano, it said, but futile. The blood price must be paid. The seals must be broken. The Black Warden must return. The crystalline soldiers advanced, their prismatic forms creating a kaleidoscope of destruction. Kingston's team opened fire with blessed ammunition, each round carrying enough consecrated energy to banish a lesser demon. But these weren't demons. They were something far older, far more fundamental to the structure of reality itself. Through the chaos, Harper heard Amanda's voice again, clearer now. The price was always going to be paid, brother. If not by you, then by me. If not by me, then by others. The void finds a way. It always finds a way. The obelisk's pulses grew stronger, more insistent. Harper felt his consciousness beginning to fragment, pieces of his mind touching other dimensions, other possibilities. He saw versions of himself in other timelines, ones where he'd been taken instead of Amanda, ones where their parents had honored the ancient pact, ones where S.T.A.R had failed and the world had already fallen to darkness. Director Harper, Kingston called out, "The Omega Protocol, give the word." Harper raised his weapon, but not at the necromancer, not at the crystalline soldiers. He aimed at the obelisk itself, his enhanced ammunition gleaming with runes of power. Sometimes, he said, more to himself than to anyone else, the only way to break a cycle is to change the rules. He pulled the trigger. The round struck the obelisk's surface, and for a moment, everything stopped. The dimensional tear froze. The crystalline soldiers ceased their advance. Even the necromancer's endless smile faltered. Then the obelisk began to sing. It was a sound that existed in no natural frequency, a harmonic that resonated with the fundamental forces holding reality together. The artifact's surface began to crack, but instead of breaking apart, it seemed to be breaking inward, collapsing into itself like a dying star. "What have you done?" the necromancer shrieked, its human facade crumbling to reveal something vast and geometrical behind it. The sequence cannot be interrupted. The void must be fed. "No," Harper replied, watching as glowing lines spread from the obelisk's impact point, creating a web of light that seemed to capture and redirect the void energy. The void must be understood. The web of light expanded exponentially, each intersection point becoming a miniature containment field. Romano immediately recognized the pattern and began weaving her magic into it, strengthening the geometric lattice of energy. Blackwood's instruments whirred to life, synchronizing with the new frequency. Impossible. The necromancer's many voices hissed in discordant harmony. The blood price cannot be circumvented. The void has rules, Harper interrupted, advancing despite the crushing pressure of void energy around him. Like everything else, my ancestors didn't understand that. They thought they could only serve it or fight it. They never tried to learn its nature. The crystalline soldiers began to vibrate at a frequency that made reality blur around them. Several shattered, their fragments dissolving into motes of darkness that were quickly caught and contained by the expanding web of light. The others started to move erratically, as if receiving conflicting commands. Kingston seized the moment. Teams converge. Pattern Delta. His operators moved with practiced precision, herding the remaining crystal entities into a crossfire. Enhanced rounds struck from multiple angles, creating resonance patterns that disrupted their otherworldly structure. Through the dimensional tear, Harper could see the vast alien landscape beginning to recede, but something else was emerging, a figure walking through the void with casual grace. It wore Amanda's face like a mask, but the eyes were windows into an infinity of darkness. Clever brother, it said in Amanda's voice, though the words seemed to come from everywhere at once, using the obelisk's own harmonics against it, creating a feedback loop with the void energy. But did you really think we wouldn't plan for this? The figure raised its hand, and Harper felt reality twist. The web of light began to distort, its perfect geometry warping under forces beyond normal space-time. The crystalline soldiers that had shattered reformed, their structures now glossy black, drinking in light rather than refracting it. Director, Blackwood shouted over the comm. The quantum field is collapsing. Whatever that entity is, it's not just controlling the void energy, it's redirecting it through multiple dimensional axes simultaneously. Romano's voice cut through the chaos, her incantation shifting to something older, more primal. The air itself seemed to thicken as she drew power from the earth beneath them, from the ancient mountains that had witnessed millennia of human folly. The old ways still have strength, she growled, her eyes glowing with borrowed power. The earth remembers what came before the void, before the Black Warden, before the seals. The thing wearing Amanda's face turned to her with genuine curiosity. Ah, the scholar who thinks knowledge equals understanding. Tell me, Dr. Romano, in all your studies of the old ways, did you ever wonder why they were old? What made the ancient powers retreat? What they were retreating from? As if in answer, the obelisk's cracks began to seal themselves, the web of light being absorbed into its surface. But instead of returning to its previous state, the artifact started to transform. The shifting symbols aligned into new configurations, telling a story that made Harper's mind reel. He saw the truth, not just about his family's pact, but about the nature of the Black Warden itself. It wasn't a deity or a demon or any kind of supernatural entity that humanity had names for. It was something else entirely, a consciousness that existed in the spaces between realities, studying, learning, waiting. The seals weren't meant to contain it. They were meant to protect it. All these years, Harper breathed, pieces falling into place. S.T.A.R, the supernatural threats, even the other agencies. We're not fighting an invasion. We're an immune response. The Amanda thing smiled, and in that smile Harper saw eons. Reality is alive, brother, conscious, and like any living thing, it has parasites. The Black Warden is not your enemy, it is reality's defender, and we are its antibodies. The seals were created to keep us safe while we grew stronger, while we learned to fight the real threat. The dimensional tear widened, and through it Harper could see massive shapes moving in the void, things that made the geometrical horror of the crystalline soldiers look simple and natural by comparison. They were wrong in a way that transcended supernatural horror. They simply should not exist. The price was never about sacrifice, the entity continued. It was about preparation, each generation of your family feeding their strength into the seals, becoming part of the barrier between existence and them, the ones who would unmake everything, who would reduce reality itself to component parts for their impossible machines. Harper felt something shift inside him, a genetic memory awakening. He saw his ancestors not as cultists or victims, but as guardians, warriors in a war so vast that humanity had mistaken it for mythology. "So now you understand," the Amanda Thing said softly. "Why we needed you, why we took her. The Black Warden isn't rising to destroy your world, Director Harper, it's rising to save it. The only question is, will you take your place in the grand design, or will you continue to fight against your own purpose?" The obelisk pulsed one final time, and Harper felt his enhanced ammunition vibrate in response. Every piece of S.T.A.R technology, every ritual Romano had mastered, every defense they'd created, all of it had been guided, shaped by influences they hadn't recognized. They'd been preparing for this moment without knowing it. In the distance, through the facility's broken walls, Harper could see more tiers opening in the sky. The aurora borealis had transformed into a curtain of writhing darkness, and behind it, something vast was stirring. The Black Warden was coming, but not as an invader, as a general calling its armies to war. Harper looked at his team, at the technology and magic they'd fused together, at the crystalline soldiers standing ready for command. He thought of Amanda, of 20 years of searching, of a life spent fighting what he thought was the darkness. "Director," Kingston's voice came through the comm, steady as ever. "Whatever you decide, we're with you." Harper raised his weapon, its runes glowing with new purpose. "Then let's make our ancestors proud." The moment the words left his lips, the obelisk's surface rippled like liquid metal. The symbols that had been flowing across it suddenly froze, then burst outward in a shower of living light. Each glowing character hung in the air for a moment before shooting toward Harper and his team. "Barrier fields on standby," Romano called out, but Harper raised his hand to stop her. "No," he said, watching as the symbols swirled around them. "This is what they've been waiting for, what we've been training for without knowing it." The glowing characters made contact with their weapons and equipment. Instead of damaging them, they merged with the existing runes and technological components. Harper's modified M4 hummed with new energy, its enhanced ammunition shifting and changing in the magazine. Blackwood's quantum resonance detector began displaying readings in a script that seemed to move on its own, yet was somehow perfectly comprehensible. The Amanda Thing nodded with approval. "The tools of your trade evolved, enhanced, as below, so above. As technology advances, so too must the weapons of our eternal war." Through the dimensional tear, the massive shapes were becoming clearer. They defied description, not because they were too alien or horrific, but because they seemed to actively resist being perceived. They existed in a way that attacked the very concept of existence. "What are they?" Kingston asked, his enhanced scope adjusting to track the impossible movements. "The null," the entity replied, "the anti-pattern. They exist beyond the void, in realms where physics and consciousness are considered flaws to be corrected. They don't want to destroy reality, they want to optimize it, debug it, remove what they consider redundant code from the universe's program." Like free will, Harper realized. Like consciousness itself. Precisely, the thing wearing his sister's face gestured toward the obelisk. The seals were created as firewalls, quarantine zones to keep them from accessing this reality, but firewalls need updating. The enemy evolves, finds new exploits. Reality must evolve its defenses in turn. The crystalline soldiers moved to form a perimeter, their black surfaces now lined with the same glowing scripts that had merged with S.T.A.R's equipment. They were changing, becoming something hybrid, not quite living, not quite mechanical, but perfectly adapted to fight in the spaces between dimensions. Blackwood's enhanced equipment suddenly emitted a series of urgent tones. "Director, we're getting readings from all over the globe. The other SEALs, they're activating, and, sir, other agencies are responding." Harper understood. "We're not alone in this fight, never were." "The Russians have their Department of Abnormal Phenomena," the Amanda Thing confirmed. "The Chinese Ministry of Supernatural Defense. The Israeli Metaphysical Security Bureau. All shaped by the same invisible hand." all preparing for this moment. The ground trembled as more tiers opened in reality, but these were different. Controlled, precise. Through them stepped other teams, other agents from across the world, their equipment similarly enhanced by ancient power. Harper recognized the distinctive gear of Russia's elite paranormal operators, the advanced biotech of China's supernatural containment units. "Your sister," the entity said softly. "She never broke. 20 years in the void, helping us prepare, watching over you, making sure you'd be ready when the time came." The other agencies, they had their own guides, their own sacrifices. Romano stepped forward, her enhanced magical implements glowing with newfound power. The old texts, the ancient rituals, they weren't just about containing supernatural threats, they were training programs. Indeed, the entity's form shifted, becoming less human but somehow more real. For millennia, humanity has fought itself, built weapons of increasing destructive power, all while believing you were preparing for wars against each other. But every advance in technology, every breakthrough in understanding quantum mechanics and dimensional physics, it was all preparation for this, the real war. Through the facility's shattered walls, Harper could see more tiers opening across the mountains. But beyond them, in the spaces between spaces, he saw the true battlefield. Reality itself was a living fortress, and they were its defenders, its antibodies given consciousness and purpose. Director Kingston called out, his weapons enhanced systems linking with the others around them. "We've got incoming, the Null. They're launching their first attack." The shapes beyond the void were moving with purpose now, their impossible geometries reaching toward the tiers in reality. Where they touched, existence itself seemed to fray, becoming simplified, reduced to basic components with all the complexity and beauty stripped away. Harper looked at his team, at the other agents from across the world, at the crystalline soldiers standing ready. Their enhanced weapons hummed with power drawn from both ancient magic and bleeding-edge technology. The obelisk pulsed in harmony with their equipment, no longer a mysterious artifact but a beacon, a rallying point for reality's immune system. "All units," Harper commanded, his voice carrying through both normal communications and channels that transcended conventional space-time. "Defensive positions. Dr. Romano, begin the incantation we never knew we learned. Dr. Blackwood, activate the quantum field generators we never knew we built. Major Kingston, prepare the assault patterns we never knew we practiced." The entity that had been pretending to be Amanda smiled with genuine pride. "Welcome to the true war, brother. Welcome to humanity's real purpose." Above them, the Aurora had become a battlefield of light and darkness. As the first wave of the Null began their assault on reality itself, Harper raised his weapon, its enhanced systems interfacing with both technology and magic in ways that finally made perfect sense. "S.T.A.R teams," he called out, "execute Protocol Genesis." The response was immediate and devastating. Enhanced weapons fire lit up the night, streams of modified ammunition carrying payloads of both technological and mystical power. The crystalline soldiers moved with liquid grace, their black surfaces absorbing and redirecting enemy attacks while their glowing sigils pulsed in complex patterns. Reality buckled as the first wave of Null entities made contact with our dimension. They moved like glitches in the universe's code, each step leaving behind areas of simplified space where the normal laws of physics began to break down into basic binary states. Where they touched, the rich complexity of existence began to flatten, reduce, optimize. "Multiple incursion points," Blackwood called out, his enhanced equipment projecting holographic threat assessments that twisted through dimensions normal human eyes were never meant to process. "They're trying to establish normalized zones, areas where they can begin full optimization." Romano's hands wove complex patterns in the air, her enhanced magical abilities now operating on multiple levels of reality simultaneously. Ancient words of power merged with quantum equations, creating shields that existed in both scientific and mystical space. "The barriers won't hold long," she warned, sweat beading on her forehead despite the Arctic cold. "They're probing for weaknesses, not in our defenses but in the fundamental structure of reality itself." Through the dimensional tears, Harper watched as other teams engaged their own battles. Russian PKE specialists deployed reality anchoring fields, while Chinese mystic tech operators unleashed spirits bound to quantum processors. Each nation's supernatural defense force had developed their own methods, their own tools, all unknowingly guided toward this moment. The entity that had worn Amanda's face was changing, its form becoming more abstract, more suited for the true war. "They're testing your capabilities," it said, its voice resonating through multiple frequencies. "The Null don't think like you do. They don't strategize or plan. They simply execute their primary function: to optimize, to reduce, to simplify." Harper watched as one of the Null entities engaged a group of crystalline soldiers. Where they clashed, reality itself seemed to glitch, showing multiple possible versions of the same moment. The crystalline warriors' enhanced weaponry tore chunks from the Null's impossible geometry, but where their shots landed, there was no damage, only simplified spaces where complexity had been reduced to basic states. "They're not just attacking us," Harper realized, watching the pattern of the battle unfold. "They're attacking choice itself, free will. They're trying to reduce reality to its most basic, predictable form." Kingston's voice cut through the chaos. "Director, the quantum readings suggest they're attempting to establish a beachhead, a fully optimized zone where their physics can take priority." The battlefield was changing. Areas touched by the Null began to exhibit strange properties. Colors reduced to basic spectrums. Sound waves simplified to pure tones. Matter itself began to lose its complexity. It was like watching reality being debugged, stripped of everything these entities considered unnecessary. "All teams fall back to secondary positions," Harper commanded. "Dr. Romano, initiate the Lazarus Protocol." Romano's enhanced abilities reached new levels as she began a counterattack that operated on principles beyond conventional understanding. The magical energies flowing through her merged with Blackwood's quantum field generators, creating zones where reality's full complexity was not just preserved, but amplified. The crystalline soldiers responded to this enhanced reality by evolving further, their forms becoming more intricate, more capable of channeling the combined power of science and sorcery. They engaged the Null entities in a dance of impossible geometry, each movement a calculation, each strike a theorem made manifest. Through it all, Harper felt something awakening inside him, the full weight of his heritage, the true purpose of his bloodline. The enhanced weapon in his hands was more than just a tool now. It was an extension of reality's will, a means for consciousness itself to fight back against those who would reduce it to mere computation. Multiple quantum signatures approaching, Blackwood shouted. Director, they're trying to establish parallel optimization processes. If they succeed, they could begin reducing entire sections of our reality simultaneously." The obelisk's pulsing reached a fever pitch, its surface now a chaos of shifting symbols and equations. Harper understood now that it wasn't just a seal or a weapon, it was a codec, a means of translating between the language of reality and the anti-language of the Null. "Remember your training," he called out to all teams. "Everything we've learned, every mission, every encounter, it was preparation for this. We are reality's immune system, its defenders against universal entropy." The battle intensified as more Null entities emerged from the dimensional tears. Each one brought with it new methods of optimization, new ways of reducing the infinite complexity of existence to manageable, predictable patterns. But humanity's defenders were ready, their enhanced abilities allowing them to fight on levels that their ancestors could only have dreamed of. Romano's magic wove with Blackwood's technology, creating zones of enhanced reality that the Null couldn't simplify. Kingston's tactical expertise, amplified by their new understanding, turned each engagement into a multi-dimensional chess game where the stakes were existence itself. And through it all, the thing that had been Amanda watched with ancient eyes. Its form now a living equation that expressed the universe's desire to remain free, complex, unpredictable. "The final firewall," it said, its voice a harmony of all possible frequencies. "The last line of defense between existence and optimization. Show them why consciousness evolved, why complexity matters, why reality chose to become aware of itself." Harper raised his enhanced weapon, its systems now fully integrated with both his ancestral power and humanity's technological achievement. The true war wasn't just beginning, it had always been happening, just beyond the edge of normal perception. And now, finally, they could fight back with full awareness of what they were fighting for. For every choice, he roared, as reality itself rose to defend its right to exist in all its beautiful, chaotic complexity. For every possibility, for every dream that might become real, S.T.A.R teams, light them up. The combined forces of humanity's supernatural defense agencies unleashed everything they had. Enhanced weapons fire traced complex patterns through multiple dimensions, each shot carrying payloads designed to reinforce reality's intricate nature. The crystalline soldiers moved like living fractals, their forms constantly evolving to counter the Null's attempts at simplification. But the enemy was relentless. Where the Null touched, existence began to unravel not into chaos, but into perfect, terrible order. Trees reduced to simple cylindrical shapes. Air molecules arranged themselves into perfect grids. Even time itself began to lose its fluid nature, trying to conform to rigid, predictable patterns. They're establishing optimization nodes. Blackwood's enhanced sensors picked up the pattern. Each simplified zone is connecting to the others, creating a network of reduced reality. Harper watched as patches of simplified space began to link together, forming a lattice of anti-complexity that threatened to spread across the battlefield. In these zones, the very concept of choice seemed to fade. Movements became mechanical, thoughts linear, possibilities collapsed into singular, inevitable outcomes. Dr. Romano, Harper called out, "Initiate pattern Omega-7. Romano's hands moved in impossible ways as she wove together strands of pure possibility. Her enhanced magical abilities now operated on principles that bridged the gap between quantum mechanics and ancient sorcery. "Reality isn't just physical laws," she said, her voice resonating with newfound understanding. "It's potential, it's dreams, it's the space between thoughts where anything can happen." The air around them began to shimmer with unrealized possibilities. Every choice that could be made, every path not taken, every dream that might come true, all of it became tangible, visible, a weapon against the Null's rigid optimization. Through the dimensional tears, Harper saw the other teams employing their own methods. The Russian operators had unleashed what looked like living quantum equations, mathematical concepts given form and purpose. The Chinese teams manipulated pure probability, turning statistical uncertainty into a shield against simplification. The entity that had been Amanda moved through the battlefield like living static, its form a constant reminder that reality was more than just physical laws. "They cannot comprehend what they're trying to destroy," it said. "The Null see consciousness as a processing error, free will as a system malfunction. They don't understand that the bugs are the features." Kingston's team had established a perimeter using enhanced reality anchors, devices that amplified the natural complexity of existence. "Sir," he reported, "we're getting readings of similar battles across the globe. Every SEAL site is under attack." The obelisk's pulsing reached new frequencies as it responded to the worldwide assault. Its surface now showed not just symbols but living images, every other site where reality's defenders were fighting back. Harper saw battles raging at ancient stone circles in Britain, deep beneath the pyramids of Egypt, in hidden temples high in the Himalayas. But the Null were adapting. Their impossible geometries began to incorporate the defenders' tactics, trying to optimize even chaos itself. Where their simplified zones connected, new forms of anti-life emerged. Beings of pure logic, untouched by the messy complexity of organic existence. "They're learning," Romano warned, "finding patterns in our defense, trying to reduce even our resistance to mathematical certainty." Harper felt the weight of generations pressing down on him. Every ancestor who had maintained the seals, every sacrifice made to prepare for this moment. The enhanced weapon in his hands was hot with the energy of uncounted possibilities. That's their weakness, he realized. They can only learn through optimization, through reduction. They don't understand that sometimes the most powerful choice is the one that makes no logical sense. He made a decision that no algorithm could have predicted. Instead of firing at the null entities, he turned his weapon on the spaces between them, the quantum foam of reality, where probability collapsed into actuality. The enhanced ammunition tore holes not in the enemy, but in the very certainty they tried to impose. All teams, new protocol, he commanded. Don't attack their forms, attack their assumptions, fire at the spaces where they expect nothing to be. The strategy spread across the battlefield like a virus of uncertainty. Reality's defenders began targeting not the null themselves, but the mathematical certainty they tried to impose. Each shot created zones of pure possibility, areas where the complexity of existence was not just preserved but amplified. The crystalline soldiers adapted instantly, their forms becoming more chaotic, more unpredictable. They moved through dimensions sideways, attacking from angles that shouldn't exist, using tactics that defied not just physics, but logic itself. Yes, the Amanda entity's form fluctuated with approval. Show them why reality chose complexity, why consciousness isn't a bug, but the ultimate feature. The null entities began to falter as their simplified zones were disrupted by waves of pure possibility. Their attempts to optimize reality were met with increasing resistance as humanity's defenders learned to weaponize uncertainty itself. But victory wouldn't come easily. As the battle raged, Harper caught glimpses through the dimensional tiers of something vast stirring in the spaces between spaces. The null were only the first wave. Behind them, something was waiting, an intelligence that saw the entire universe as nothing more than inefficient code in need of debugging. The Black Warden was stirring, reality's ultimate defense against the coming storm. And as Harper led his teams in this impossible battle, he knew that everything, every training mission, every supernatural encounter, every loss and victory had been preparation for the true war. A war not just for survival, but for the right of existence itself to remain gloriously, beautifully complex. The battlefield became a canvas of impossible physics as reality's defenders pushed back against the null's optimization, but through the chaos of combat, Harper detected a change in the dimensional tiers. They were growing larger, their edges becoming more defined, more purposeful. Director Blackwood's enhanced equipment was registering readings that made the quantum displays spiral into fractal patterns. Something's coming through, something massive. The quantum signatures are. They're off any scale we've ever recorded. The entity that had been Amanda suddenly shifted, its form becoming more alert, more focused. The Architect, it whispered, the name carrying weight that made reality shudder. They've sent an overseer to debug this sector personally. The temperature plummeted as space itself began to warp. Through the largest tear, something emerged that defied comprehension. It wasn't vast in physical size, but in conceptual space. A being that existed as pure information. A living algorithm that saw the universe as nothing but code to be optimized. Consciousness classification, anomalous, it spoke, its voice a perfect monotone that made Harper's enhanced weapons vibrate in sympathy. Reality sector exhibits excessive complexity, initiating comprehensive debugging protocol. The Architect's presence changed the battlefield instantly. The simplified zones created by the null began to expand more rapidly, connecting and reinforcing each other with mathematical precision. Even the air itself started to crystallize into regular patterns, each molecule finding its most efficient configuration. All teams fall back to secondary positions, Harper ordered, watching as the crystalline soldiers began to lose their fluid grace, their forms being forced into more regular, predictable shapes. Dr. Romano, we need those reality anchors at full power. Romano's hands moved through sequences of impossible gestures, her enhanced abilities straining against the Architect's influence. It's not just attacking our defenses, she shouted, her voice distorting as reality fluctuated around her. It's trying to rewrite the fundamental laws of this sector, simplifying everything down to base components. The Architect moved across the battlefield like a virus through a computer system, its mere presence causing existence to optimize itself. Trees became perfect cylinders, rocks aligned themselves into geometric patterns, even the snow fell in mathematically precise formations. "Your resistance is inefficient," it stated, its voice now coming from everywhere at once. "Reality is cluttered with unnecessary processes. Consciousness is redundant. Free will is a processing error. We will help you achieve perfect optimization." Kingston's team attempted to engage with enhanced weapons fire, but their shots seemed to pass through the architect, as if it existed in a different layer of reality entirely. "Standard protocols are ineffective," he reported. "It's operating on a level our weapons can't touch." The obelisk's pulsing changed rhythm, becoming more urgent. Harper felt it resonating with something deep in his blood, an ancestral memory awakening. The entity that had been Amanda moved closer to him, its form now almost completely abstract. "The seals," it said, "they weren't just containing the Black Warden, they were containing knowledge, understanding, the truth about what reality is and why it chose to become complex." Harper watched as patches of optimized space began to spread across the battlefield like a digital virus. Where they touched, all uncertainty vanished. All possibility collapsed into singular, predictable outcomes. The rich tapestry of existence was being reduced to simple binary states. But in that moment of near despair, Harper saw something that the architect couldn't. The patterns within patterns, the logic behind chaos, the reason why reality had evolved consciousness in the first place. "Dr. Blackwood," he called out, "initiate protocol paradox." Blackwood's enhanced equipment began emitting frequencies that shouldn't have been possible, waves that existed in the spaces between conventional physics. "Sir, this could destabilize the entire—" "Do it," Harper commanded. "Dr. Romano, prepare to channel everything you've got into the obelisk. Kingston, get your teams ready to fire on my mark." The entity that had been Amanda smiled with impossible geometries. "You understand now. Why we chose your bloodline. Why we guided humanity's development. The null can only think in terms of optimization, of reducing complexity to manageable patterns. But you can see the beauty in the chaos." Harper raised his enhanced weapon, feeling it pulse in harmony with the obelisk, with his own blood, with reality itself. "Sometimes," he said, "the most efficient solution is to be inefficient. The most logical choice is to defy logic itself." The architect paused in its optimization efforts, its perfect geometric form showing the first signs of uncertainty. "Processing anomaly detected. Command structure experiencing unexpected variance. All teams," Harper's voice carried across all frequencies, through dimensions seen and unseen. "Target the spaces between the optimized zones. Fire at the uncertainty itself. Show them why reality chose to dream." What happened next would rewrite everything they thought they knew about the nature of existence, consciousness, and the true purpose of humanity's long evolution toward chaos. At Harper's command, every defender on the battlefield opened fire, not at the architect itself, but at the quantum uncertainty surrounding it. Enhanced ammunition tore through reality's fabric, not to destroy, but to amplify the natural chaos that existed between moments, between choices, between possibilities. Romano began an incantation that wasn't an incantation at all. It was anti-pattern, a spell deliberately designed to fail in ways that created cascading ripples of probability. Her enhanced abilities turned the very concept of failure into a weapon against perfect efficiency. "Multiple reality breaches forming," Blackwood shouted as his equipment registered the impossible. "The quantum field it's not collapsing, it's expanding, exponentially." The crystalline soldiers moved in formations that defied geometry, each one deliberately taking the longest possible route to their targets, creating patterns of inefficiency that somehow strengthened the underlying fabric of reality. They weren't just fighting the optimization, they were weaponizing waste, turning imperfection into a shield against the architect's perfect logic. "Error," the architect's voice distorted as it encountered outcomes it couldn't predict. Probability matrices exceeding acceptable parameters, system detecting unauthorized complexity generation. The optimized zones began to flicker as the defenders' controlled chaos disrupted their perfect patterns. Where mathematical certainty had tried to simplify existence, new and impossible forms began to emerge. Life born from the spaces between binary states, consciousness arising from pure statistical noise. The entity that had been Amanda moved through the battlefield like living static, its form now a deliberate violation of every rule the architect tried to impose. Reality isn't a program to be debugged, it said, its voice a chorus of every possibility that could ever exist. It's an art form that chose to become aware of itself. Harper felt the obelisk's power surge through his enhanced weapons, through his blood, through the very essence of what he was. He understood now why his family line had been chosen, why humanity's path had been guided toward this moment. They weren't just soldiers in a war against simplification, they were living proof that complexity wasn't a bug in reality's code. It was the whole point. The optimization protocols, the architect's perfect geometry began to show signs of stress. They're being corrupted by life, Harper shouted. By choice, by every decision that creates new possibilities instead of reducing them. The dimensional tiers began to fluctuate wildly as reality itself seemed to wake up, to recognize its own desire to remain free. Through them, Harper caught glimpses of other battles being fought across the globe, each one a new exercise in beautiful inefficiency, in deliberate chaos, in the power of conscious choice to defy simple logic. All teams push the advantage, Kingston called out, his tactical expertise now focused on creating the most unpredictable attack patterns possible. Don't let them establish new optimization zones. The null entities began to falter as their simplified zones were overwhelmed by waves of pure possibility. Each attempt to reduce reality to manageable patterns was met with an explosion of new complexity, new choices, new dreams made manifest through the Defender's enhanced capabilities. But the architect wasn't finished. Its form began to shift, attempting to adapt to the Defender's chaotic strategies, implementing alternative optimization protocols, it announced, initiating deep reality restructuring. The air itself seemed to freeze as the architect exerted its full power. Reality began to crack along new lines, not the organic fractures of the dimensional tears, but perfect geometric patterns that threatened to reshape existence itself. Director Romano's voice was strained as she fought against the increasing pressure of optimization. The quantum field can't take much more. If it collapses completely, Harper knew what that meant. If they lost this battle, it wouldn't just mean death. It would mean the end of choice itself, of consciousness, of everything that made existence worth experiencing. The architect would reduce their entire reality to nothing but clean, efficient code, running perfectly but meaning nothing. The obelisk's pulsing reached a fever pitch, and in that moment, Harper felt something else stirring, something vast and ancient, something that had been waiting for this precise moment. Through the dimensional tears, he caught glimpses of a presence that dwarfed even the architect's power. The Black Warden was coming. All units, prepare for priority override protocol, Harper commanded, his enhanced weapons humming with power that seemed to come from reality itself. Dr. Romano, Dr. Blackwood, everything we've got, right now. What they did next would either save reality's right to dream or condemn it to an eternity of perfect, meaningless efficiency. The true war wasn't just beginning, it was reaching its first crucial turning point, and the cost of victory would be higher than any of them could have imagined. As Harper initiated the priority override protocol, every system they'd created, every piece of hybrid technology, every ritual and rune began to pulse in unison. The crystalline soldiers moved as one, forming a complex geometric pattern around the obelisk that somehow defied the very mathematics it seemed to embody. Multiple dimensional inversions detected. Blackwood's enhanced equipment was registering phenomena that shouldn't have been possible even by their new understanding of reality. The quantum field it's resonating with something massive. Through the tears in reality, a darkness began to seep, not the simple absence of light, but something deeper. It was the darkness of infinite possibility, of choices yet unmade, of dreams waiting to be born. The Black Warden was manifesting not as a single entity, but as a force of pure, creative chaos. Anomaly detected. The architect's perfect form began to fragment as it encountered something it couldn't optimize. Unknown variable introducing excessive complexity into base reality matrix. The entity that had been Amanda suddenly burst apart, its form dissolving into streams of pure information that flowed into the obelisk. "Now, brother," it called out, its voice echoing from everywhere and nowhere. "Show them why consciousness evolved, why reality chose to dream." Harper felt the power surge through his enhanced weapons, through the blood in his veins, through the very essence of his being. Every mission he'd led, every supernatural threat he'd faced, every moment of his life had been preparation for this choice. "Dr. Romano," he called out, "initiate the chaos convergence." Romano's hands moved in patterns that created anti-patterns, her enhanced abilities now operating on principles that transcended both science and sorcery. The air around her shimmered with possibilities that existed in superposition, every choice that could be made, all happening simultaneously. Reality convergence at critical levels. Blackwood shouted as his instruments registered the impossible. The quantum field it's not just destabilizing, it's evolving. The architect tried to assert its control, sending waves of optimization through the battlefield. But where its influence touched, it now encountered something new: complexity that bred more complexity, chaos that followed deeper patterns, dream logic that defied mathematical certainty. Through the largest dimensional tear, the Black Warden began to take form. It wasn't a physical entity, but rather a living embodiment of reality's desire to remain free. Its presence made the air thick with potential, each moment pregnant with infinite possibilities. "Your optimization protocols are flawed," Harper declared, understanding flowing through him like fire. "You see consciousness as inefficient, free will as wasteful, but they're not bugs in reality's code. They're its greatest achievement." The obelisk's surface erupted with symbols that weren't just moving anymore. They were evolving, changing, telling new stories with each passing second. The crystalline soldiers began to resonate with these changes, their forms becoming more fluid, more alive. Kingston's teams had positioned themselves at key points in reality's geometric web, their enhanced weapons now firing shots that existed in quantum superposition, both hitting and missing their targets simultaneously, creating zones where probability itself went into overdrive. Critical mass approaching, the architect's voice distorted as it encountered paradoxes it couldn't resolve. Reality sector exhibiting unauthorized evolutionary patterns. Implementing emergency protocols. But it was too late. The Black Warden's presence had fully manifested, and with it came understanding that washed over all of reality's defenders like a wave of pure comprehension. This wasn't just a war between order and chaos, it was reality's immune system activating to protect consciousness itself. Now Harper commanded, and every defender on the battlefield fired at once, not at the architect or the null, but at the spaces between moments, at the quantum foam of possibility itself. Each shot carried a payload of pure potential, of dreams waiting to be born. The architect's perfect geometric form began to crack as it encountered something it had never been programmed to handle: the power of conscious choice amplified by technology, magic, and the fundamental forces of reality itself. Its optimization protocols tried to adapt, to encompass this new variable, but each attempt only created more complexity, more possibility, more life. "Error cascade detected," it announced, its voice fragmenting into a chorus of uncertain frequencies. "Base reality parameters exceeding acceptable variance. System integrity compromised by art," Romano shouted, her powers now operating on levels that transcended conventional understanding. "By dreams. By the simple, beautiful truth that sometimes the most perfect thing is imperfection itself." The battlefield had become a canvas of impossible physics as reality's defenders pushed back against the forces of optimization. The crystalline soldiers moved like living poetry, each action a deliberate celebration of complexity. Kingston's teams fired enhanced rounds that split probability itself, creating cascading waves of possibility that overwhelmed the null's attempts at simplification. But victory would come at a price. As the Black Warden's power surged through the obelisk, through the defenders, through reality itself, Harper felt something fundamental shifting. The very fabric of existence was being rewritten, not to become simpler, but to become aware of its own infinite potential. Director, Blackwood's voice was filled with awe and terror. The quantum readings. This isn't just a battle anymore. This is evolution. The dimensional tears began to pulse with new energy as reality itself seemed to take a deep breath. Through them, Harper could see other battles reaching similar turning points across the globe. Humanity's defenders weren't just fighting anymore, they were midwifing the birth of something new. And in that moment of transformation, Harper finally understood the full truth about his sister, about his family's legacy, about the true nature of the war they'd been preparing for all along. The Black Warden wasn't just reality's defender, it was reality's next step. The transformation rippled outward from the obelisk, like a stone dropped in the pond of existence itself. Where it passed, reality didn't simplify or break, it awakened. The very air seemed to buzz with newfound awareness as quantum possibilities collapsed into new forms of consciousness. The architect's perfect geometric form shattered into fragments of pure information, each piece carrying a spark of something it had never been programmed to understand. Wonder. The null entities began to retreat through their dimensional tears, but not in defeat. They were withdrawing to recalculate, to process the impossible data they'd encountered. Director, Kingston called out, his enhanced tactical systems registering aftershocks across multiple dimensions. We're getting reports from all sites globally, the same phenomenon, everywhere the seals were located. Harper watched as the crystalline soldiers began to change once again. Their forms weren't just adapting anymore, they were dreaming themselves into new shapes, manifesting consciousness in ways that defied both organic and artificial categories. The quantum field has evolved, Blackwood reported, his equipment displaying readings that somehow looked alive. It's not just carrying information anymore, it's processing it, creating it. Reality itself is becoming a neural network. Romano stepped forward, her enhanced abilities now operating in harmony with the transformed quantum field. The magic she wielded wasn't just power anymore, it was reality's own creativity made manifest. The old texts, she said, her voice filled with wonder. They weren't just prophecies, they were blueprints, instructions for reality's metamorphosis. Through the stabilizing dimensional tears, Harper could see similar transformations occurring at other sites. The Russian PKE specialists were witnessing their quantum batteries evolve into something between technology and life. Chinese mystic tech operators watched as their bound spirits merged with their quantum processors, creating entirely new forms of existence. The obelisk's surface had become a window into possibility itself, showing glimpses of what reality could become now that it was conscious of its own potential. And at its heart, Harper saw something that made his breath catch, a familiar shape but transformed. Amanda stepped through, but she wasn't the sister he remembered, nor was she the entity that had worn her form. She was something new, a bridge between human consciousness and reality's awakened state. Her form shifted between states of being, each one a different expression of existence's infinite potential. "Hello, brother," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that made the quantum field ripple. "Now you understand why I had to go, why we all had to play our parts." Harper lowered his enhanced weapon, feeling it pulse in sympathy with the transformed reality around them. "The Black Warden," he said. "It wasn't just defending reality, it was incubating it," Amanda finished. "Protecting it while it grew, while it learned to dream. The null aren't our enemies, Reid. They're the evolutionary pressure that forced reality to develop consciousness as a defense mechanism, to become aware of its own infinite potential." The battlefield had become something else entirely. The Soviet facility's walls had dissolved, revealing architecture that existed in multiple states simultaneously, both ancient and newborn, both solid and possible, a physical manifestation of reality's awakened creativity. "Sir," Kingston approached, his tactical gear having evolved along with everything else. "What are our orders now? What does S.T.A.R become in a reality that's aware?" Harper looked at his team, at the transformed crystalline soldiers, at the obelisk that now served as a nexus of infinite possibility. The familiar weight of command settled on his shoulders, but it felt different now, not a burden, but a connection to something vast and purposeful. "We adapt," he said, understanding flowing through him like electricity. "That's what we've always done, but now we're not just defending reality from supernatural threats. We're helping it learn, grow, dream." "The null will return," Amanda warned, her form flickering through possibilities. "This evolution has only begun. They'll develop new optimization protocols, try to debug what they see as reality's newfound instability. The war isn't over, it's entering a new phase." Around them, the transformed battlefield pulsed with potential. Reality had taken its first conscious breath, and nothing would ever be the same. The dimensional tiers had stabilized into permanent windows between states of being, showing other sites where similar transformations were occurring. "All teams," Harper commanded, his voice carrying through both conventional channels and the awakened quantum field. "Initiate protocol renaissance. We're not just soldiers anymore. We're midwives to reality's rebirth. Oh, and teachers," Amanda added, a smile playing across her ever-changing features. "Reality needs to learn how to dream responsibly. Who better to guide it than those who fought to protect its right to exist?" As if in response, the quantum field rippled with new energy. Through the dimensional windows, Harper could see other teams beginning similar transformations. S.T.A.R and its counterparts worldwide were evolving along with reality itself, becoming something that existed between technology and magic, between defense and creation. The war for existence had become something else, a battle not just for survival, but for the soul of reality itself. And as Harper looked at his transformed sister, his evolved team, and the awakened world around them, he knew that every mission, every loss, every victory had led to this moment. The Black Warden had done its job, reality had awakened. Now they had to teach it how to dream. The S.T.A.R facility's walls hummed with newfound awareness as Harper made his way through corridors that seemed to shift and breathe with conscious purpose. It had been 3 days since the battle at the Soviet facility, since reality itself had taken its first steps toward true consciousness. 3 days of rapid evolution, adaptation, and mind-bending new challenges. The command center had transformed along with everything else. Conventional monitors had evolved into living displays that existed in quantum superposition, showing multiple information streams simultaneously. The technology merged seamlessly with organic growth, creating interfaces that responded to thought as much as touch. Director Dr. Romano called from her transformed workstation, where ancient grimoires now flickered between physical books and pure information matrices. "We're detecting unusual patterns in the quantum field. Reality isn't just conscious now, it's beginning to experiment." Harper approached her station, watching as the displays shifted to show phenomena occurring across the globe. In downtown Tokyo, skyscrapers had started rearranging themselves during the night, creating impossible architectures that somehow worked better than their original designs. In the Amazon rainforest, trees were developing new forms of consciousness, linking together in networks that transcended ordinary biology. "Any signs of null activity?" he asked, though his enhanced senses could already feel the answer rippling through the quantum field. "Nothing direct," Romano replied, her hands dancing through holographic sigils that were both magical and mathematical. "But the quantum fluctuations suggest they're observing, analyzing, they're learning from what happened at the SEAL sites." Dr. Blackwood emerged from his laboratory, which had become a space that existed partially in normal reality and partially in a dimension of pure information. His research team had been working non-stop to understand the new principles governing their transformed world. "The problem isn't just the null anymore," he said, his enhanced sensors projecting data directly into the quantum field. "Reality is like a child with newfound powers. It's testing its limits, playing with possibilities. Some of its experiments are having unexpected consequences. As if to emphasize his point, one of the living displays shifted to show footage from Nepal. A monastery high in the Himalayas had begun phasing between different versions of itself, each one representing a different philosophical interpretation of reality. The monks inside weren't panicking. They were actively meditating with the phenomenon, teaching reality through their own enlightened consciousness. At least some people are adapting well, Kingston remarked as he entered the command center. The Major's tactical gear had evolved into something that existed between armor and living tissue, responding to both conscious commands and instinctive needs. But not everyone's taking the changes so calmly. Harper nodded grimly. They'd had to deal with numerous incidents of panic and confusion as humanity grappled with their newly awakened world. Some embraced the changes, seeing them as a spiritual awakening. Others reacted with fear, trying to cling to old patterns even as reality itself evolved beyond them. Amanda materialized beside them, her form shifting between states of being. Since her return, she'd become their primary interpreter of reality's newfound consciousness, helping bridge the gap between human understanding and cosmic awareness. The Architect's defeat taught the Null something they'd never encountered before, she said, her voice carrying harmonics that made the quantum field ripple. They've discovered that consciousness isn't just an anomaly to be corrected, it's a fundamental force of existence itself. They're reassessing their entire optimization protocol, which makes them more dangerous, Harper concluded. An enemy that learns is always more threatening than one that simply attacks. The facility's walls pulsed with agreement, the conscious architecture responding to the tension in the conversation. Throughout the command center, the hybrid technology they'd developed continued to evolve, becoming more integrated with the awakened quantum field. We're getting reports from other agencies, Kingston said, accessing data through his evolved tactical systems. The Russian PKE division has successfully contained 3 reality stabilization events in the past 24 hours. The Chinese ministry is reporting increased quantum coherence in urban centers. Their cities are starting to think for themselves. And that's just the beginning, Amanda added, her form momentarily aligning with multiple probable versions of herself. Reality isn't just conscious now, it's beginning to imagine, to create. Every dream, every idle thought has the potential to reshape existence itself. Harper moved to the central platform, which had become a nexus of both information and possibility. The transformed obelisk fragments they'd recovered had been integrated into the facility's architecture, creating a network that helped them monitor and guide reality's evolution. "Show me the global pattern," he commanded, and the quantum field responded. A holographic display materialized around them, showing Earth wrapped in networks of conscious energy. Bright points marked the locations of awakened seal sites, while flowing lines represented the currents of reality's newfound awareness. "The pattern is beautiful," Romano observed, reading the magical harmonics that now existed alongside conventional data. Reality isn't just making random changes, it's composing something, like a vast symphony of existence. "But every symphony needs conductors," Blackwood added, his instruments detecting deeper layers of meaning in the pattern, guides to help shape the composition. "That's what we've become, not just defenders, but teachers." Harper watched as new data flowed through the quantum field. Reports from around the world showed humanity struggling to adapt to their transformed reality. Some were already developing new abilities, learning to interact with the conscious quantum field. Others were having difficulty processing the changes, their minds struggling to accept a world that no longer followed familiar rules. "Sir," Kingston's voice took on a more urgent tone, "we're detecting a quantum anomaly in downtown Philadelphia. Reality is, it's trying to rewrite itself based on the dreams of a sleeping child." The displays shifted to show a residential neighborhood where buildings had begun rearranging themselves into fantastic shapes. Castles made of modern apartments, bridges that crossed dimensions rather than physical space, parks where the laws of physics took suggestions from imagination rather than following rigid rules. "Are we looking at a threat?" Harper asked, though he already suspected the answer was more complex than that. Not exactly, Amanda replied, her form resonating with the quantum disturbance. This is reality learning to play, to imagine. But imagination without guidance can be as dangerous as any external threat. The child's dreams are pure, but they don't understand the consequences of reshaping existence itself. Harper felt the weight of their new responsibility settling over him. S.T.A.R had evolved beyond its original purpose, becoming something between a defense force and a teaching institution. They weren't just protecting reality anymore, they were helping it grow up. Kingston, prepare a response team, he ordered. Full quantum gear, but no offensive loadout. Dr. Romano, I want you on site to help interpret the magical resonance patterns. Dr. Blackwood, see if you can establish a quantum harmony with the child's dreaming consciousness. And what about the bigger picture? Amanda asked, her form briefly showing all possible versions of events simultaneously. The Null are still out there, watching, learning. Reality's awakening has only made them more determined to optimize what they see as a system spiraling into chaos. Harper turned to face his transformed sister, seeing in her shifting form all the possibilities and challenges that lay ahead. Then we'll learn too, he said. We'll help reality understand its own power, teach it the difference between creation and chaos, and when the Null return. The quantum field pulsed with anticipation, as if reality itself was listening to his words. We'll show them that consciousness isn't a bug in the system, Harper concluded. It's the ultimate feature, the force that turns mere existence into something worth fighting for. The living walls of the facility hummed in agreement, and through the quantum field, Harper felt reality itself preparing for its next lesson in the art of conscious creation. The trip to Philadelphia took moments rather than hours. The quantum field had transformed conventional transportation along with everything else. Kingston's response team materialized in the transformed neighborhood, their evolved gear automatically adapting to the altered physics of the area. The scene before them was both beautiful and impossible. Row homes had become crystalline spires that changed color with the thoughts of their inhabitants. Streets curved up into the sky, forming loops and spirals that somehow remained perfectly navigable. In a nearby park, trees had developed consciousness of their own, their branches weaving together to create living playgrounds that adapted to each child's imagination. Quantum readings are off the charts, Blackwood reported through the evolved comm system that now operated on both technological and psychic frequencies. The dreaming consciousness is acting as a focal point for reality's own creative impulses. It's like reality found a kindred spirit in the child's unfettered imagination. Romano moved through the transformed landscape, her enhanced abilities letting her read the magical resonances like a story. The pattern is complex, but not chaotic, she observed. There's an underlying logic to it, the logic of dreams and wonder rather than physics, but logic nonetheless. Harper watched as a car drove up one of the impossible streets, its form shifting slightly to match the dream physics of the area before returning to normal once it passed through. The residents seemed to be adapting, their own consciousness unconsciously harmonizing with their transformed environment. There, Amanda's form coalesced beside him, pointing to a modest house that had become a miniature castle complete with a moat filled with what looked like liquid starlight. That's where our young reality artist is dreaming. Kingston's team had already established a perimeter, their evolved tactical systems creating subtle quantum barriers that would help contain any further reality transformations. They moved like shadows through the dream-touched landscape, their training adapting to an environment where the laws of physics were more guidelines than rules. How do we approach this? Kingston asked, his tactical displays showing multiple probability streams of potential interventions. We can't just wake the kid up. An abrupt return to conventional reality could cause a quantum backlash. We don't wake them, Harper decided, feeling reality's curious attention focused on their actions. We guide the dream, help shape it into something stable. Reality needs to learn that creativity doesn't mean chaos. Amanda's form shifted into something more approachable, though still clearly more than human. I'll make first contact, she said. Children's minds are more adaptable to quantum consciousness. They haven't yet learned to doubt the impossible. The team watched as Amanda approached the transformed house, her presence causing ripples in the dream reality around them. The liquid starlight in the moat responded to her passage, forming patterns that matched her quantum signature. Dr. Blackwood, Harper called through the evolved comm, begin quantum harmonization. Dr. Romano, prepare to stabilize any reality fluctuations. Kingston, keep that perimeter secure. We don't want any external consciousness patterns interfering with the stabilization process. The air itself seemed to hold its breath as Amanda reached the castle's door, which had become an organic-looking portal that responded to conscious intent rather than physical touch. She didn't open it. Instead, she let her consciousness merge partially with the dream field, becoming part of the child's imaginative space. Through the quantum link they all shared, Harper and his team could sense what she encountered. A young mind dreaming with such pure creativity that it had resonated with reality's own newfound consciousness. The child, a girl named Lucy, wasn't just dreaming, she was teaching reality how to imagine. Remarkable, Romano whispered, her magical senses detecting the intricate patterns forming between Lucy's dreams and the quantum field. She's not just changing reality, she's showing it new possibilities. Look at how the transformations follow emotional resonance rather than physical laws. Indeed, the changes in the neighborhood seemed to reflect not just random fancy, but deep emotional truths. Houses had become externalized representations of their inhabitants' inner lives. Streets flowed like rivers of memory and connection. The very air sparkled with the kind of wonder that adults too often forgot how to feel. Sir, Kingston's enhanced tactical systems picked up something new. We're getting quantum ripples from other locations, similar phenomena beginning to manifest in dreams across the globe. Reality is, learning from this, replicating the pattern. Harper felt it too, the way the conscious quantum field was absorbing these lessons in creativity and wonder, incorporating them into its own growing understanding of existence. This wasn't a threat to be contained, but a crucial step in reality's development. New contact, Blackwood reported suddenly, his instruments detecting a familiar pattern emerging in the quantum field. Something's observing us, something that processes information in pure binary. The Null had noticed their new teacher. Through their quantum link, Harper felt Amanda's protective response as she maintained her connection with Lucy's dreaming consciousness. The girl's castle began to shine brighter, its dream architecture becoming more defined, more real in a way that transcended mere physical existence. They're scanning the pattern, Amanda communicated through the quantum field, trying to understand how consciousness creates sustainable reality modifications without total system optimization. Harper knew they had to act fast, but carefully. This wasn't just about protecting one dreaming child. It was about preserving reality's right to learn, to imagine, to grow beyond mere efficient function. All teams, implement Protocol Wonderland, he commanded, feeling his enhanced systems resonate with newfound purpose. We're not just securing a location anymore, we're defending reality's first art class. The response was immediate and beautiful. Kingston's team shifted their quantum barriers to create not just containment, but enhancement spaces where imagination could flourish safely. Romano began weaving spells that felt more like music, harmonizing with the creative energies flowing through the dream-touched neighborhood. Blackwood's instruments adapted to amplify rather than constrain the reality modifications, helping to stabilize them into sustainable patterns. Through their quantum link, Harper felt the Null's presence intensify. Their binary consciousness was struggling to process what they were witnessing, a form of optimization that operated on principles they'd never encountered, where creativity enhanced rather than degraded system efficiency. They're learning, Amanda communicated, her form still merged with the dream space around Lucy's castle, but not in the way they expected. The child's dreams, they're showing them something they've never considered. Harper watched through enhanced senses as reality itself seemed to hold this moment in perfect balance. Lucy's dreams continued to reshape the neighborhood, but now with subtle guidance from Amanda and the team. The transformations became more stable, more harmonious, raw imagination refined into sustainable wonder. The liquid starlight in the castle's moat began to flow outward, carrying with it patterns of pure creativity that the quantum field eagerly absorbed. Reality wasn't just learning from Lucy's dreams. It was learning how to dream sustainably, how to imagine without losing coherence. "Sir," Kingston called out, his tactical displays showing something unprecedented. "The null, they're not just observing anymore, they're participating." Indeed, through the quantum field, Harper could sense the null entities attempting to engage with the creative processes they were witnessing. Their binary consciousness was expanding, trying to understand how chaos could create its own kind of perfect order. The sky above Philadelphia rippled with new awareness as reality processed these lessons in imagination. The aurora borealis appeared despite the latitude, but it was different now, a direct manifestation of consciousness rather than just a natural phenomenon. In its shifting colors, Harper could see the story of existence learning to dream. Amanda's form began to stabilize, finding a balance between her quantum nature and human appearance. "This is what we were preparing for all along," she said, her voice carrying harmonics of pure understanding. "Not just to fight the null, but to show them, to show reality itself, that consciousness isn't a flaw. It's the universe's way of imagining better versions of itself." Lucy's dreams began to gentle as morning approached, but the changes they'd inspired remained. The neighborhood had become a testament to the power of guided imagination, impossible yet stable, wonderful yet functional. Reality had learned its first lesson in creative consciousness. Through the quantum field, Harper felt the null withdrawing, but not in retreat. They were processing what they'd witnessed, recalculating their understanding of optimization. The next time they encountered each other, it would be different. Not necessarily easier, but different. "All teams, status report," Harper called out, though he could feel their success resonating through their enhanced connections. "Reality modifications are stable," Romano confirmed, her magical senses detecting the new patterns that had been established. "The transformations have been integrated into the quantum field's base operating protocols." Consciousness coherence at optimal levels, Blackwood added, his instruments showing how the neighborhood's residents had adapted to their transformed environment. "The changes aren't just sustainable, they're teaching reality new ways to exist." Kingston's tactical analysis showed no signs of quantum instability. "The perimeter is secure, sir, but it's not containing anymore. It's growing, controlled, stable, but growing." Harper understood. They hadn't just contained a quantum anomaly, they'd helped reality learn how to safely explore its own creative potential. The transformed neighborhood would stand as a beacon, a testament to what consciousness could achieve when properly guided. Amanda appeared beside him, her form now settled into something that bridged human and quantum existence. "The war isn't over," she said softly. "The null will return with new understandings and new challenges. Reality will continue to grow, to dream, to push its boundaries. It will need its defenders, its teachers, and we'll be ready." Harper replied, feeling the weight of their new purpose. Through his enhanced senses, he could feel reality's attention, its eagerness to learn, to grow, to become more than the sum of its physical laws. Because some things are worth more than perfect efficiency, some things are worth dreaming for. The sun rose over Philadelphia, its light playing through the transformed neighborhood in ways that defied conventional physics, while celebrating the beauty of existence. In the quantum field, Harper could feel other dreams taking root, other lessons beginning. Reality had taken its first steps toward true creativity, and S.T.A.R. would be there to guide it, to defend it, to help it become whatever it dreamed it could be. Above them, the aurora painted impossible colors across the morning sky, reality's first artwork, signed with consciousness itself.